Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak on Citizen Television. Thank you for staying with us. We welcome your contributions towards the tail end of this broadcast. We'll sample your feedback on Twitter. The hashtag is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. With me in studio is the Secretary General of the Kenya National Union of Teachers, Collins Oyu, and his predecessor, Wilson Sosion, who is also with us in studio and former nominated Member of Parliament. And we are also joined by Cyprian Ombati, who is the National Vice Chairperson of the University's Academic Staff Union, and the union that is up in arms against the planned privatization move by the Trade Cabinet Secretary Moses Kuria, targeting higher learning institutions in the country. Gentlemen, your time is all appreciated, and many thanks for coming. Cyprian, may I begin with you? Why are you opposed to the planned privatization move by the Trade CS Moses Kuria?
Thank you. Good morning. Yes, you find that the CS for Trade, Moses Kuria, had mentioned that there are plans to privatize universities in Kenya. When you look at it, he is a minister for trade, and when he says that, you don't take those words lightly. That means that it is there, it is in the pipeline, and they are about maybe to do it. But as WASU, we are opposed to privatization of higher education or universities, because as much as they want to privatize parastatals and some state agencies in the Republic of Kenya, we feel that universities should be excluded out of that list. Because if today you say that you want to privatize a university, then it means that you want to make education out of reach to the majority of Kenyans who are poor, who have that ability to access higher education. But once it is privatized, then you know that obviously it is be out of reach for them. So as WASU, we will not stand there to watch as public universities are privatized, because if that is done, then it means that is one way of killing education system in this country. And therefore we feel that universities are not factories, universities are not profit-making organizations, so that they can be privatized in order for the country to be able to make or reap benefits out of that. Okay, and we'll talk about the institutional commitment needed in terms of increasing the capacity of high learning institutions and generally how to better our education system in the country. But as stakeholders, have you established a communication channel in reaching out to the respective government agencies, including the CS that you have talked about, as to what are the reasons as to why they want to do that? Yes, in fact, we expected that it is them, because according to government procedures, it means that once you do something, then you must first reach to stakeholders. Actually, it is their duty to be able to see that they reach all stakeholders, they bring them on board, they convince us as to a reason why they want to do that. But we have sought audience with the Minister for Education, CS Machogu, so that to have a deep understanding on, is that the plan they have. As a CS of Education, he has not mentioned about that, but the CS Trade has mentioned it. In fact, we had even asked that the CS Education has to come out and pronounce himself on the position that the ministry has taken on this matter on privatization. And in terms of wanting that response from the Education CS, has he come out? No, he hasn't as of now. Okay. We hope that soon he'll be able to reach us so that we get an understanding on why do they want to go that direction. Okay. Katibu, yes. On Tuesday, you were also in the company of other unions, including the University Academic Staff Union that has a representation here this morning. And you are vehemently opposed to the planned move, according to the statement made by the Trade CS Moses Kuria. Why? Yes, I can remember too well that on Tuesday, we actually launched the research findings of a research that we did together with WASU and COPEDS about privatization and commercialization of education in this country. I think education is a fundamental right to every other child in this country, as actually enshrined in the Universal Declaration for Human Rights. It is important that we all see to it that the right to education is to every other child in this country. Okay. So when people come up and say we privatize, we commercialize education,
I think that one goes against the norm and the declaration therein. So totally, as Kenya national teachers, alongside our colleagues in WASU and KUPPET,
yes,
we say no to privatization. We cannot sell education. We cannot commercialize education. Learning will actually not be as required when we commercialize education. Already it is expensive for parents. We want these children to go to school. Remember the Agenda 2030 that we are all geared towards on SDG 4. Can we actually reach there if we commercialize and privatize education? We cannot.
Okay. Wilson Sosion, what's your response?
I think this is a topic that should even be taken out of your programs because it has no place. It has no place with the current government, and I'm speaking as not an insider of government, but insider of the ruling party, Kenya Kwanza coalition, and nothing has changed with the charter that was negotiated and signed with the various stakeholders in the education sector. If you look at what Kenya Kwanza is doing, we are doing things differently. And the statement by Moses Kuria was a general statement on policy of privatization. But if we get down to the Kenya Charter, Kenya Kwanza Education Charter, nowhere in the charter is privatization of universities mentioned. It is not there, and it will not happen. It is not about to happen. And I don't think Machogu can waste time responding to hot air, an issue. What government is trying to do is to unlock the current challenges in the universities. The carryovers of the mistakes of the past, that was done by the former administration of Uhuru Kenyatta. And the current problems what we should be discussing is how to resolve the current problems in the universities, particularly those of funding, where Matiang'i in 2016, with his dictatorship nature, messed up with the moderation of KCSE exams to facilitate transition to universities. And that is what the universities, really unions, should be fighting very strongly to ensure that transition is above 30–40% to universities from KCSE. You remember, and at that time, I was at the helm of NAT, and I raised a red flag on grading, using a uniform grading system to grade all the subjects. And that led to reduction of transition to university from 265,000 down to 88,000 in 2016. And 2017, down to 88,000. And that led to the crumbling of universities. Universities are now in the red because of the policies of the past, and particularly what Matiang'i was doing. And that is what Kenya Kwanza is trying to address. We have a presidential working party, and there are 3 subcommittees, one on basic education, dealing with the rollout of and implementation of CBC and review of our education system. And then we have the TVET, because TVET is a critical area that that this government and this administration must invest in if we have to experience technological transformation and growth of industries. Then the other one is university education.
Okay. Let me
where the
come to
come in.
Yes.
But I would say, in summary, the item of privatizing universities or any public institution or any education is not the agenda of Kenya Kwanza, and it will not happen.
Now, because you have mentioned the problems that are bedeviling our higher learning institutions, and when you look at the government's investment per capita, is what I'm talking about here, because you mentioned the Presidential Working Party on Education Reforms. Of course, we'll be taking a look at the extensive reforms that are required in the education sector. But there has been an underinvestment in terms of per capita allocation the government was making, and this spans over the past 3 administrations in the past. What then we have here are universities that, in the view of many analysts, lack the collective institutional commitment in terms of building their financial capacities, then how will this problem be addressed?
Now, if you look at financing of universities, it's always a shared responsibility. And currently, for public universities, parents are paying 16,000 per student. But the policy of Kenya Kwanza government is to expand funding for government-sponsored students. And if you look at the manifesto, and it is being scrutinized by the Working Party, and it will have to be factored into the government financing, is that the three funding existing bodies, that is Higher Education Loans Board,
yes,
TVET funding board, and University Funding Board, which provides, University Funding Board actually provides 43%. Higher Education Loans Board currently provides 13%, and that brings to a total of about 56%. There's still a gap of 44%. But the Higher Education Loans Board is intended to be double, from 13 to 26%. That means students will get more expanded funding, and of course, with zero interest rate. And this is a great step. And consolidating all of them to rational the funding from the angle of government will see more resources put in for the students under sponsorship. Now, in funding of universities, government funding alone is not enough. There are other income-generating programs that universities must engage in, like admission of students through programs. And in Kenya, we've had what you call self-sponsored students who have qualified and admitted to various courses and pay for themselves.
Okay.
And this is a practice all over the world. You go to Malaysia. Malaysia admits, in fact, a bigger population of students in Malaysian universities are foreign students. And this one becomes actually a great service industry. And what we would want Kenyan universities is to be a great service destination, and tapping from the domestic students and also from external. And if you look at KCSE results this year, which is very critical, some Kenyans are saying, oh, there are too many A's. What did you expect students to get? We should have more A's, we should have more students. But C+ and above, you've seen, is around 173,000.
Thank you.
That means for universities, the other real alternative source of income is self-sponsored students that we can't run away from. It will have to come back this year, and I believe in 2-3 years, universities will have reasonable sources of funding from self-sponsored students. That is the second source.
I'll come to
the other third source.
Just hold that thought, because I'll need a follow-up on the same, because there has been a concern in terms of the reforms, and this amid a backlash, warning by the International Monetary Fund on the Nairobi, Kenyatta and Moi universities. But first, Katibu Collins Oyu, when we talk about the other avenues for resource mobilization by the universities and higher learning institutions, how then should there be a focus in terms of the commitment that ought to be forthcoming with regards to databases, human capital, marketing and communications, mobilizing and managing donors, and ability to run different type of activities to sustain the financial float that ought to be, so that calls like privatization ought not to be coming from a CS and then create worry amongst unions like you and WASU?
Yeah, I think I want to agree with my brother Wilson on, students paying for themselves. Like for me, for example, I went to university, I paid for myself. Of course, that was an income to the university. What we're against as unions is investors coming in and, taking over what should actually be sponsored by the government or what we should sponsor by ourselves. That is a great danger. And to tell you, when you invest, you expect profit. Well, look at what education is now. There's a lot that is now is caring about, the expense of education. When you come in with an investor, my brother, I think you are making the situation even worse. Yes, let the government fund, and let us come in as, students who would wish to sponsor themselves. That is a position. Let us forget about, privatization of education even at that level. When my brother Sosion says that this is nowhere in the Kenya Kwanza government, I want to agree. We've read and we've gone through the education charter. How we wish that all that is contained in the education charter for Kenya Kwanza shall be actually made right for everybody. That's a position.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then coming to you, when we talk about raising revenues via tuition fees, cost recovery measures, and commercializing of the activity, this leads to profit, as Collins point out. But then how do you also not lose the focus on the quality of education and the graduates that you churn out?
Yes, when you look at, yes, by charging fees from students, that can also raise funds for the university. But I want to say that when you look at that, it may not really be of much help. First, we want the government to do their part, which, for example, if you look at infrastructure within the university, you cannot do that using fees collected from students. Again, if we go that direction, then you'll find that at the end of the day, if that may affect the quality at the university. For example, what will be collected from students may not be enough, for example, to build laboratories. Remember, universities are world class. Anybody would want a university in Kenya that a person can come from another country and study here. So for such kind of infrastructure within the universities, they require large amounts of funds, which must only come from the government. If you look at our universities, in Kenya, we have about 77 universities. Out of those 77, about 38 or so are private universities, and another 38 are public universities. In other words, what it means is that half of the universities in Kenya are private, and another half are public. So that tells you that there is no reason for somebody to say that we want to privatize so that we can be able to make money within the universities, because already within Kenya, half of the universities are private. So which ones do you want again to privatize? Is it the public? So you want 3/4 or so of universities in Kenya to be privatized? If we go that direction, then children who are coming from poorer homes, I can tell you, they will not see education at the end of the day. We are talking of Mago and others, even Moses Kuria and others, the CS, even the president himself, they were able to go through universities because of public universities. But if you now bring in an investor, then now you are closing it out for those who are coming from poor homes. Another thing is, when you look at funding in the universities, the amounts that are required there, it's only the government that can be able to pay.
Okay.
Right now, we have about 56 billion debts that universities owe various stakeholders. Talk of part-time lecturers, contractors, talk of statutory dues, 56 billion as of last year, June 2022. So what that tells you is that unless the government steps in and be able to see how they bail out universities, I can tell you, even if they go for fees and others, they will not be able to raise those amounts. The other thing that we need to do is there's something they call differentiated unit cost, which the government is funding at 44%.
But when you talk about...
They should go to 80%.
Okay, Cyprian, when you talk about bailout, because I'm looking at the report by IMF, the private investment arm of the World Bank, which identified 3 universities, Kenyatta, Nairobi, and Moi,
yes,
as among the top state-owned agencies carrying the biggest financial risks. And the country was left with no option but to overhaul the institutions as the 2.34 billion bailout by IMF before it comes to the country must be addressed first, and that was at the height of the pandemic. So going forward, whilst there has been a lowering student per capita from the government, that is for a period of many, many years,
yes,
the signs have been there. So what needs to be done then? Because if even the 56 billion Kenya shillings bailout is done by the government, so going forward, how do you sustain yourselves financially?
Yes. What now we are saying is that the government to do their responsibility. First, they bail out whatever is remaining. Then now we start on a clean slate, whereby now universities will be funded in accordance. Remember, as I've said, there's a DUC model where they said that they will fund 80%. Right now, as of last year, they are doing about 44%. And what this now makes, what happens at the university is that whatever amounts that they get, you are not able even to pay salaries. Take of Egerton University. They are supposed to get about 250 million per month. But now the government is giving them 140 or something like that. They expect a university to generate about 120 million per month. Is that possible? That tells you that it is not possible, because in a day, you require that university to be generating about 4 million shillings. How can that be possible? Because in a university, it's not a setup whereby you say, it's not like a supermarket that you sell products and you have money at the evening. Universities are made to generate funds through research. How can you do this research if the university has not been given the fundamental or basic amounts that will make them to generate these amounts? So what we are now asking the government is that they must take that responsibility by funding properly universities, because a public university is a public sector. If you don't fund it, then how do you expect it to generate?
Okay, thank you. Mwalimu Sosian, can I give you briefly before we go on a break and come back? Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes. I've dealt with university disputes for a long time, particularly salaries and others. And currently, and this is what we should really focus on most. Currently, the universities are unable to remit the third-party statutory deductions of NSSF, pay, SACCO loans for the lecturers. And this was caused by discontinuation of self-sponsored students. And I think we should be very clear about the sources of funding for universities. Government capitation, which government has paid? That is one. The other bit, additional income-generating resources from continuing students, self-sponsored. And let us separate. Students who are admitted through COOPs are sponsored by government. And those who are admitted independently by universities to pay to take up other courses, they pay for themselves. And then the other third source of income generating program is research activities. So that is, resources are of course sourced through negotiations and proposals and the rest. And if you look at the Kenya Kwanza Charter, we commit to put at least 2.5% of the GDP to research generally. That includes universities. So really, let us first of all identify the problem. When SSP was discontinued, the university financing crumbled. And that alternative source, we cannot shut our eyes and begin pressurizing government where government is even paying. We should boldly correct. Let's look at Kenyatta University. Okay. It has one of the best state-of-the-art infrastructure that were put up in recent times. And this is in relations to the good investment and programs they're doing on self-sponsored program. There are universities that are still doing very well because of self-sponsored programs. So I think we should package it properly. Okay. So I'm sure the issue of privatization, it doesn't exist. Okay, so what you're talking about... What does not exist. Okay. Let us now focus on how to bring the universities back to life. Okay, what you're talking about more or less is the model that collapsed in 2016 as the number of qualifying students in the KCSE examinations fell drastically, and the market for self-sponsored students evaporated overnight, according to a report by the World Bank. This is at the heart of the financial crisis that engulfed Kenyan public universities since then. When we get back from the break, the current NAT Secretary General, the former, and the National Vice Chairperson of the University Staff Union Association will be continuing with this discussion and take a look at the ways of increasing the financial kitty of public universities in the country, including contract research, consultancies, and also other fundraising activities, some of which have been done already since the government started reducing student budgets in the mid-1990s. You're watching Daybreak on Citizen Television. The hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. When we get back from the break, the discussion continues here on the broadcast. Stay tuned.